So this threat, this species dominance issue, the threat that maybe if humanity decides to build these artilects, these godlike, massively intelligent machines, who could then possibly turn around and kill us, that's an obvious existential threat. But there are others. So how does this particular one, species dominance, compare in weight, if you like, with the others? Well, what are the others? Well, nuclear holocaust, major atomic war, nuclear winter, because if we do lots of bombs and the dust goes into the air, blocks off the sun, then the plants die and then we die, so another major one. Ozone layer, overcrowding, too many people, overpopulation, many, right? A lot of them. So how does this new one, this species dominance threat, how does that rank relative to the others? Well, even if there is a major nuclear holocaust, I still think some human beings would survive. Right? It'd be very hard to imagine that we totally wipe out everybody. But if the Artlex come into being, and if they decide that human beings should be got rid of, then they would be perhaps smart enough and systematic enough to get rid of us to the last person. That's a possibility. And that's very threatening. I mean, then it really would be extinction. I mean, I grew up in Australia, and there's a large island off the southeast coast of Australia called Tasmania. And it's sort of notorious because it's one of the few examples on the planet where, in a sense, what the Nazis called Endlösung, meaning the final solution, the end solution, meaning the total extinction of the people, that actually took place in Tasmania. The Tasmanian Aborigines, native Australians, they were wiped out in the 19th century to the last person. When I was a small child, I remember looking in a museum in Melbourne when I was growing up and seeing the skeleton of the last Tasmanian Aborigine. So I really hope that these Artlex don't do the same to us. I mean, a lot of people have called me alarmist in the sense of not being very realistic. I don't agree, of course. Yes, I am alarmist, but in a different sense. I'm deliberately trying to raise the alarm. I really think, a major problem is coming. So in that sense of the word is appropriate. So my basic feeling is that Hollywood has more or less got it right. Now that's easy to do for the Hollywood types because they don't have to do the real work, right? They just imagine and put their fantasies on film. But I do see the machines getting increasingly intelligent, and it is a potential threat. And a lot of people, it's not just me. I mean, the surveys are out there, and they're showing that it splits humanity more or less down the middle.
So do you think that Hollywood films and representations of reality plot devices are a good medium for spreading knowledge and providing a forum for these topics? Do you think that's the right way to go about it?
If what the scientists are saying and what Hollywood is saying, if they match pretty well, then the obvious answer is yes. At least it makes people somewhat aware of what's coming. So in that sense, yes.
But are they aware of it for the right reasons?
The right reasons? Yeah. Depends on your viewpoint.
Are they, is it a well-considered awareness, or is it just a plot device? Superficial.
Well, for most people it's superficial, of course. But for the thinking portion of humanity, I think it could serve a useful purpose in the sense of they'll at least have some kind of visual memory of what could happen. I mean, for me, the most memorable scene in Terminator 2 was the blast of the hydrogen bombs. It just absolutely vaporized everybody. I mean, that image is burned into my memory. It was so graphic and so visceral. Ugh, it scared me crazy. So that kind of phenomenon, I can imagine, Hollywood serves a useful purpose. Also, you need to be aware, I think, that as the scientists get this message out increasingly, as the species dominance issue goes mainstream in the media, then the journalists themselves, the filmmakers will be influenced, the script writers will be influenced by this greater level of knowledge. And so their creations will become more and more realistic. You can imagine movies will come out, the movie the scientists fear will come true, that kind of thing.
Can you think of any other movies before their time which accurately predicted a future event?
Yeah, in the 50s and later decades, there are a couple of movies on the theme of a nuclear holocaust. In fact, we're being filmed right now in Melbourne. It was a famous movie based on a book called On the Beach. And I think it was written by an Australian guy, and Ava Gardner, a famous actress in her time, and others, came to Melbourne to film the movie On the Beach. And it was basically about the after effect of a nuclear holocaust. Most of the rest of the world already obliterated by the bombs, and Melbourne was sort of the last city, because it was so deep in the southern hemisphere, the last city to be affected. And the general message of the film towards the end, you became conscious everyone would die. It was just total annihilation. So the end of the movie, people are just waiting to die, effectively, trying to communicate with the rest of the world, no contact, everyone was dead. So that scared a lot of people and helped create what was the word? I'm just forgetting a little. The anti-nuclear movement, the ban the bomb. Yeah, that was it. The ban the bomb movement, ban nuclear testing movement. So it had quite an effect.
So yeah, let's go back to what do you think the biggest misconceptions about the future are today? What do you think the biggest misconceptions about the future we have?
The biggest misconceptions about the future, let's say probably those based on ignorance. An alarmingly high proportion of society is simply, to be honest, scientifically ignorant. They still have their mindset dominated by old ideas from earlier centuries. I mean, a lot of people, for example, do not accept the idea that we're just physics and chemistry. They're not physicalists, they're more vitalists. They feel there's something more than just physics and chemistry to explain who and what we are. And I mean, notions like soul, that kind of thing. So if you have that kind of viewpoint, if that's the way you see the world, then probably you will find the idea of an artificial mind, artificial consciousness, that kind of thing. You probably reject that idea as ridiculous, as science fiction. So really, probably the most effective way to counter that set of beliefs would be simply to build one. Just actually build an artificial brain that is conscious and intelligent and so forth. But once you've done that, it's fait accompli, and the thing exists, and then perhaps there's an existential threat. You only have to really build one, right? And if it's smart enough, it can probably make copies of itself. It can spread itself throughout the planet, through the internet and whatever, and then there'll be a zillion of them.
What do you think about people's seriously believing in things like the end of the world coinciding with the Mayan calendar, the 2012 scenario?
What's my attitude towards people who seriously take the idea of 2012?
Why do they believe it? It's not all of them that are stupid. Why are people gullible? Why consistently over history, people have always fallen for these sorts of things. Why?
I guess it reflects some kind of need that we have. We want to believe in stuff. We're curious. We're curious about the non-banal, odd things and curiosities. And it's in our nature. We're a curious species. Why are some people so uncritical? Well, partly because they're untrained. I mean, it took us our species took us a long time to learn to do science. Science is the most effective knowledge-generating system that we have, and it's only very recent. It's just a few centuries old, and it's not easy. It's not easy being a scientist, right? You need to be bright. You have to absorb a lot of knowledge. You have to learn how to think rationally and logically and so on. It takes training. So it's not surprising most of people don't have that. So, of course, they can't benefit from that manner of thinking. So it's probably not surprising that, half or so of people actually read horoscopes, that kind of stuff. So there's a kind of mismatch between the thinkers and the mass audience, and I don't see that going away for genetic reasons. I mean, there's just a bell curve, right? Just the reality, and it will always be with us. Well, unless we go massively genetically engineering, but if we don't, that bell curve reality is always going to be with us. So, a couple of decades from now, if these early artilects, these artificial intelligences, if they're not human-like, if in their patterns of thinking, if they're not even in humanoid form, let's say, probably how will the mass of humanity react towards them? Well, my guess is negatively. I mean, look how human beings react to just minor differences, like how slitty or open eyes are, or hair color or skin color. We react very negatively towards the in-group and the out-group. So I can imagine when these artlects come into being, I see a sizable proportion of humanity seeing them as them, not us, right? And I can imagine a truly visceral rejection of what they are. And as they become increasingly intelligent and potentially threatening, that the human reaction will be hostile. That's what I'm expecting. That's one of the major reasons why I really think that as the IQ gap between human level intelligence and machine level intelligence, as that gap closes, then a fair proportion of humanity will feel hostile towards these machines. When push really comes to shove, as that gap closes, they will probably go to war. They'll feel so strongly about it, so threatened, that they will take those extreme measures to ensure that humanity remains the dominant species. They will just utterly reject these alien minds.
So, will all of humanity reject alien minds? Do you really think every one of us will?
So,
I mean,
would everybody...
let's just say an alien race came down to Earth and they were arachnoids, or they were lizard people, or they looked like frogs. Do you think we'd hate them just because of what they looked like, or the way that they communicated? Or?
So, would everybody reject these creatures? Well, we're talking about billions of people, of course, and there are many different personality types and so on. So obviously, some people would not reject them. Some people would be absolutely fascinated by their potential, and those people I call cosmists, the people who are in favour of building these amazing creatures, because they'd be more conscious of what these machines could become, because their potential is so vastly superior to what we are. I mean, we just rattle off some of the properties. They would think 1,000,000 times faster than we would, because they're thinking electronic speeds, not chemical speeds, the way we do. They could have virtually unlimited memory. Okay? So you could put all the world's knowledge in just one intellect, one artificial brain. They could probably do evolutionary engineering type experiments on themselves. Randomly change parts of their structure and use other parts to observe the results. And if those experiments were successful, they could then incorporate those changes into their own structure, the majority of their structure, and they could do all this at the speed of light. Okay? So that they would be just godlike, amazing creatures. So I can imagine probably the more educated portion of society would be fascinated by this, and especially the scientists, the physical scientists and computer scientists, artificial intelligence researchers and so on, who would be well informed about their potential. They would probably be fascinated by this, right? So I see a correlation between the better informed and the higher intelligence, that section of society, probably more likely to be cosmist in their feelings than the rest. But for the vast bulk of people, probably, and again it's just a guess, but in a couple of years I think we should have better sociological data from actual pollsters, opinion poll companies going out into the general public and asking them what they really think. I'm looking forward to getting that data. We don't have it yet, but I suspect within 3 to 5 years we probably will have that data, and then we can be much better informed about how society reacts towards this enormous issue of species dominance.
Do you see the younger generation being more receptive to these ideas, or to the idea of having like a global brain or some sort of AI which is way smarter than they are?
So,
and not, in a sense, not being against it.
Do I think younger people would be more open to these ideas? The idea that humanity maybe should or should not build artefacts, these massively intelligent machines? It's an interesting question, and that too, when the pollsters go out and perform opinion polls on society, then part of that society are the younger people, and so if they notice differences between the younger people and the older people, then that would be interesting. In my own experience, it's somewhat anecdotal, but when I give talks, quite often I will invite my audiences to vote on this question. Do they think individually, do they think humanity should or should not build these artefacts? And the last couple of years, I've noticed that if I'm talking, for example, to computer science 20-year-old university students, now about 80% of them are now voting in favor of building these artefacts. And I ask them, why do you feel this way? And basically they feel the same way as I do. They just think it's just so magnificent. It would be almost a tragedy not to do it. I mean, if you look at the potential of what an artifact could be compared to a human life, I mean, the latter is just, in a sense, pathetic, right? We're snuffed out. In a sense, we're programmed to die. Like insects can live days. We live on the order of, say, 100 years. And some trees can live 1,000 years. So implicit in our DNA is the instructions, maybe not explicit, but by default, our DNA does not keep us alive for 1,000 years. Right? It's just not there. So you can say, in a sense, we're programmed to die. So if we could make ourselves immortal, give ourselves virtually unlimited memory and think 1,000,000 times faster and get out into the universe and change our form and our shape, and wow, I mean, for a lot of people, that's a major draw card, right? That's what a lot of people want. So another proportion of humanity would like to do that. They would like to become that themselves. People like that are called cyborg or cyborgists. They're the people who want to become cyborgs. So they add this intellectual components to their own brains and their own bodies and so on, and change themselves bit by bit, step by step, into an intellect. And then they're gods, right? It'd be a kind of god building. So as that technology becomes more manifest, then I wouldn't be at all surprised a lot of people would go for that. Instead of running the risk of being superseded by these artefacts, they become artefacts themselves. So a lot of people go for that. But then their existence, as they come into being, the cyborgs and the artefacts, they would then be a threat to the other group, the people who are opposed to all this, whom I call Terrans. So I see the Terrans effectively lumping together the cyborgs and the Artilex because they're effectively the same. I mean, the computing capacity of even just a small grain of sugar vastly outclasses the computing capacity of the brain, the human brain, by billions, zillions. It's hugely more. So a cyborg does not have to do much to become effectively an Artilex. So I see these Terrans, the people opposed to building these Artilex, they'll just lump those two categories together. They'll just see pure Artilex and advanced cyborgs as effectively the same, because in reality they're almost identical.
Do you see Artilex fighting in that century?
So there are lots of scenarios for the future later into this century. So is it possible that Artilex could be fighting other Artilex? I haven't really thought about that issue very much. I suppose it's always possible. I mean, you could argue, thinking on my feet right now, if there are many Artilex of different natures, different structures, different value systems, different ethics, then perhaps there's only a finite amount of raw materials on the Earth and the planets and the asteroids and so on. So if it came to a kind of competition between various branches of the Artilex for raw materials, then maybe that would be the source of conflict, because if one group wanted to eat up all the asteroids for the one group's purposes and leave none for the rest, if you're going to create artificial intelligence, it's hard to imagine how to do that without some kind of substrate, right? You might be able to do it in quantum fields in the vacuum, maybe. It's a bit beyond my expertise, but my intuition says if you're going to build this sort of stuff, you must have some kind of substrate, some atoms or molecules, or nucleons or elementary particles or electrons or something, and there's only a finite amount of that in our solar system. So if one group monopolizes it, that squeezes out the raw materials for the other. So if the other also wants to expand, then I can imagine potential conflicts between different forms of Artilex. That's just one argument off the top of my head.
Okay. Do you think Artilex, in rise to godhood, so to speak, would consider that there may have been other Artilex that have risen in other universes or other galaxies, other solar systems? Would it be trying to rise in such a way so as to be stealthy and not be seen by other ones? Or would it be trying to rise in such a way that would be in a friendly way, so as to not look like a cancerous growth to other Artilex that have been around for billions of years?
In one of the chapters of my first book, I posed the question, and it's a very difficult one to answer, of course, because we're only human. But the question was, so one of the chapters in my first book, where I talk about the rise of the massively intelligent machine, I speculate, because that's all I can do, and for a human being it's extremely difficult. How do you imagine how a being with a trillion times the mental capacity of a human being, what would it do? How would it spend its time? What would it think about? Well, it's virtually impossible, but you can speculate nevertheless. And one idea I thought up was very probably they would just leave the Earth, right? Why should they stick around here? Because there are solar system stars that are billions of years older than our solar system, which is only about 5 billion years old. The Big Bang was 13.7 billion years ago. So there are trillion stars out there in our observable universe that are billions of years older. So highly likely, life is probably very commonplace. So a certain fraction of those reached high intelligence, technological intelligence. So quite possibly out there, are extremely advanced artilects, sort of like hyper artilects. So one of the things that a human created artilects might choose to do is to leave the Earth in search of these far more advanced artilects. And then I suppose you could speculate, would these hyper-advanced artilects elsewhere, would they consider these new Earth-like artilects as a pest, as a threat? I just don't know. Probably if they're so advanced and have been around for billions of years, then I guess they've solved the problem of how to survive long term. So maybe they could teach these human-style artilects, generated initially by humans, how to do the same. But trying to imagine how a creature with trillions of times the human brain capacity, how it would think and behave, is almost a futile exercise, right? I mean, how would a mouse think about what we do or what we think? It's almost crazy.
I mean,